The system that stops your car sliding in the rain, the little light that flickers on your dashboard when you accelerate too hard on a wet road, was once so powerful in Formula One that the sport spent the best part of a decade trying to ban it. They finally succeeded, for good, in 2008. And yet, at almost exactly the same time, on the other side of the automotive world, that very same technology was being made compulsory by law. Banned on the racetrack, mandatory on your driveway. How does that happen? How can one piece of technology be too powerful to allow in the world's most advanced motorsport, and, in the same breath, so valuable that governments force it into every new car sold? So, 3 questions for the next few minutes. 1. How can a computer grip the road better than the greatest driver on Earth? 2. How do you police and punish a weapon you can't actually see, one you can only hear? And 3. If it was banned in racing for being too good, why is it now the law in your car? Stick around, because the answer runs from Ayrton Senna standing at the side of a track, recognizing a banned system purely by its sound, to the light blinking on your own dashboard tonight. The war on wheel spin. Let's start with a problem every powerful car has, and it comes down to a patch of rubber the size of your hand. All the power your engine makes, hundreds, sometimes thousands of horsepower, has to reach the road through the tires, and each tire only touches the tarmac over an area about the size of your palm. That's it. That's the entire connection between the engine and the world. Now, if the engine delivers more force than that little patch of rubber can handle, the tire gives up and simply spins. The wheel whirls fast, smoke pours off it, but the car doesn't go any quicker. Worse, a spinning, driven wheel has almost no grip left to keep the car pointing straight, so the back can step out and you start to slide. Wheel spin isn't just slow, it's how you lose control. Here's the counterintuitive bit though. A tire doesn't grip best when it's perfectly stuck. It actually grips best when it's slipping just a tiny amount, a few percent. Go past that sweet spot and grip falls off a cliff. So the perfect driver would feed in exactly enough power to keep every tire right on that knife edge, maximum grip, no more, and constantly adjust it, corner by corner, in the wet, on the throttle, which is almost impossible for a human foot to do. Almost, because a computer can do it. Fit a sensor to each wheel, measure exactly how fast each one is turning, and compare the driven wheels to the road speed. The instant a wheel starts spinning faster than it should, the computer knows it's losing grip, and it trims the power back in a fraction of a second, hundreds of times a second, far faster and more precisely than any human. An electronic foot with perfect reflexes. That's traction control. And here's the first myth to kill. Formula One did not invent it. A Buick, of all things, had a basic version, called MaxTrack, back in 1971. By the 1980s, Toyota, Mercedes, and BMW all had it. But it was Formula One that took the idea and turned it into something so devastatingly effective, it had to be outlawed. The electronic foot reaches F1. By the early 1990s, Formula One teams had the electronics to do this properly. Williams, the dominant team of the era, wired wheel speed sensors into the engine's brain. And when the computer sensed the tires beginning to spin, it would cut the ignition to individual cylinders in the V10, throttling the power back for a heartbeat, just enough to kill the wheel spin, then handing it straight back. The effect was uncanny. Cars fired out of slow, wet corners, as if they were on rails, with none of the twitching and correcting a human driver needs. Williams and Renault won 4 constructors' titles in a row. On the stopwatch, it was magnificent. To the purists, something was very wrong. Too easy, and the FIA panics, because traction control was just one of a whole suite of electronic aids. Alongside it sat active suspension and anti-lock brakes and clever engine maps. Put them all together and the 1993 cars had become eerily easy to drive fast, and that terrified the sport's governing body, the FIA. If a computer was doing the hardest parts of the driving, what exactly were we watching? Where was the skill? Where was the hero? so they did something drastic. At a tense meeting in 1993, the teams were pressured into signing away the lot. Traction control, active suspension, anti-lock brakes, all banned for the 1994 season. On paper, the electronic era was over. On paper. Because there was one enormous problem with banning traction control. You couldn't actually see it. How do you punish an invisible weapon? Traction control doesn't have a shape. It's not a wing you can measure or a part you can weigh. It's software. A few lines of code buried in a car's computer, invisible to a scrutineer. So, how do you prove a team is cheating? Enter one of the most famous suspicions in the sport's history. Early in 1994, the very season the ban began, Ayrton Senna, the greatest driver of his generation, was out of a race after an early problem. Instead of leaving, he stood at the side of the track and simply listened. And as the Benetton cars of Michael Schumacher accelerated out of the slow corners, Senna heard it. A soft, distinctive stutter in the exhaust note. The unmistakable sound of a computer cutting the engine to manage wheel spin. The sound of traction control, which was banned. But here's the clever, maddening part. Benetton were almost certainly doing something. But they built it to sit just inside the rules. Instead of directly reading wheel spin, which was illegal, they used a sensor that measured the air pressure in the engine's intake. As a car speeds up, that pressure rises in step with speed. So, from that one legal reading, the system could work out roughly how fast the car was going and which gear it was in, and trim the power at exactly the point where the wheels would spin. A backdoor traction control, built from a component nobody could ban. The FIA was left chasing ghosts. They couldn't prove illegal traction control. They only managed to fine Benetton $100,000 for being slow to hand over their computer code. They grew so desperate that they resorted to acoustic analysis, literally recording and studying the stutter in the exhaust note to try to catch cars using it. It was an endless, unwinnable game of cat and mouse. And after years of it, the FIA threw up its hands. In 2001, unable to police the ban, it simply gave up and made traction control legal again. The only way to kill it. So how in the end did they finally kill it? Not by writing a cleverer rule. You can't outright software. They killed it by taking the software away. For 2008, the FIA forced every single team to use one identical standard control unit, the same engine computer, built to a common specification for the whole grid. If everyone runs the exact same locked box, nobody can hide secret traction control code inside it. And with that, the weapon that had haunted the sport for 15 years was finally genuinely gone. It has never returned. So, Formula One spent a decade and a half fighting to get rid of traction control, which makes what happened out on the public road all the more extraordinary, because the rest of the world was fighting just as hard to put it in. The inverted paradox. Here's the twist that makes this whole story so strange. Everything that made traction control unwanted in racing is exactly what made it priceless on the road. In Formula One, the objection was that a computer managing grip took the challenge away from the driver. But on a wet motorway, with an ordinary person at the wheel who is not a professional, a computer that quietly stops the car sliding isn't cheating. It's a guardian angel. The very same electronic reflex that was too good for racing turned out to be one of the greatest safety inventions in the history of the car. And it grew up. Traction control stops a wheel spinning under power. But engineers extended the same idea into something cleverer still, called electronic stability control. Using those same wheel sensors, plus a sensor that knows which way you've turned the steering wheel and another that feels the car beginning to rotate, it can tell the difference between where you're trying to go and where the car is actually going. And if the car starts to slide wide or spin, it doesn't just trim the engine, it automatically brakes one individual wheel, nudging the car back onto your intended path. It catches the skid before you even realize you're in one. And this is where the numbers become genuinely serious. Studies by American safety authorities estimated that stability control could prevent around a third of all fatal accidents. A third. In Europe, it's credited with saving something like 15,000 lives, which is why it stopped being an optional luxury and became the law, mandatory on new cars in the United States from 2012 and across the European Union from 2014. Today it's fitted to around 80% of all new cars on Earth. The other side of the coin. It isn't flawless, mind you. There are moments when traction control is a nuisance rather than a help. Trying to pull away in deep snow or in sand, where you actually want a little wheel spin to dig in and get moving. That's exactly why your car has that TC off button. And it's worth being honest, it can't rewrite physics. It cannot save you if you throw the car into a corner far too fast. Grip that isn't there can't be conjured up by a computer. It manages the grip you have. It can't invent grip you don't. The future. Where's it heading? Straight into the electric age. And getting better. An electric motor can adjust its power far faster and more precisely than any petrol engine cutting sparks ever could wheel by wheel in milliseconds. In the best electric cars, traction control has become so fast and so seamless that wheel spin is very nearly abolished altogether. The stuttering, chattering, cat-and-mouse weapon that Senna heard from the side of the track is quietly becoming invisible. So, was your traction control really a banned Formula One weapon? Yes. The same fundamental idea. A computer sensing a wheel about to spin and stepping in faster than any human could. Was hunted, outlawed, worked around, and finally strangled out of the sport with a standard issue box of electronics. It was judged too powerful for the best drivers in the world. And then that exact power was handed to the rest of us and made compulsory. Because in ordinary hands, on ordinary roads, it saves ordinary lives by the thousand. The weapon Formula One couldn't live with is the guardian your car can't be sold without. Same reflex, same sensors, opposite verdict. So, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt your traction control kick in? That little shudder as you accelerate on a wet or icy road? And did you know it came from a Formula One arms race? And here's the loop I want to pull next time. Formula One banned another electronic marvel in that same 1994 purge. Active suspension. A system so good it was almost unfair. And it too is quietly finding its way into road cars. That's the next video. Subscribe and I'll see you there.